Hello. On today's edition of Boyden's Building Tomorrow podcast, our guest is Bill Hughes. Bill is the Executive Director of Applied Research at the Bergstrom Real Estate Center in the University of Florida's Warrington College of Business. Bill has a PhD and an MBA from the University of Georgia and received his bachelor's degree from Georgia Tech. Bill is also a CFA charter holder. Before joining the Bergstrom Real Estate Center, Bill spent 14 years at UBS Global Asset Management, including over 9 years as Global Head of Real Estate Research and Strategy. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, thank you very much. Always happy to talk about real estate.
Yeah.
We're so pleased that you're able to join us this morning. And I'm curious, as one CFA to another, what got you started on your path to your real estate career?
Well, the CFA is an interesting component of that really came very late. But real estate started when I was in graduate school, trying to find my way through. I started as an engineer and quickly learned that I wasn't an engineer and went directly to business school. And then while I was at business school, one of my professors came up and asked me if I'd ever thought about getting a PhD. And I said, no, it never crossed my mind. And he said, think about it, and walked away. That was sort of his introduction. He happened to be a real estate professor. So from there, I started working with him, and he was a terrific person to help me get started. And I haven't looked back from that point. I started as an academic at LSU, teaching real estate, and then quickly moved to the dark side because that was kind of always my motivation.
Great. So how have you seen the industry change over your career from when you first started in real estate? What are the big changes you've seen?
In many ways, there's been very little change, frankly. If we think about the ideas of negotiating purchases and leases, valuing cash flows, and converting property into higher uses and things of that nature, I think the industry hasn't changed in a long, long time. In my mind, the thing that has dramatically shifted from when I started is the availability of data. And when I started my career, basically in the 90s, there was the whole challenge for somebody who was in a strategy position was to find data and try to gather it any way you could. There were a few people who were collecting it, but very few. And it was very hard to piece things together. Now, there's a whole group of people out there providing big data sets to us, from Real Capital Analytics, which is now part of MSCI, and Moody's Analytics, CBRE, Econometric Advisors, Green Street. It goes on and on. There's a long list of data providers. The challenge today is sorting through it and trying to understand what the data are, because they're collected in so many different ways, and there's such subtle changes between them that can have a huge impact on what you're doing. And if you don't fully understand the data, you're likely to produce some really strange results. So I think today, rather than searching for data, we're wading through the data and trying to understand it. And that's the big change.
How does the Bergstrom Center help with that?
Well, we're getting started in several ways. There's a lot of history to the Bergstrom Center. It started about 30 years ago, when there were a group of real estate faculty here. I think the University of Florida had one of the early and very, very strong real estate programs with a lot of faculty here focused on real estate. And I think they discovered that there was true value in connecting the students with the industry professionals as part of the education. And so they sought to work with professionals, ask them what the changes are in today's market. They introduced them and connected them with students, which led to the students finding positions. And then about a little more than 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago, Kelly Bergstrom stepped in and endowed the center, which allowed the center to hire a professional manager. Tim Becker came in to lead the group and really organize a lot of what's going on and connecting students to professionals. And then about 5 years ago, Kelly further came in to support this applied research function that brought me to Gainesville. And what that has done is now my mission is to try to connect some of the academic work that goes on campus with the industry. And this may come as a shock, but academics tend to talk among academics, and they have their own language. And it's a language that professionals who have their own language, generally it requires a translation. So one of the functions we try to provide is take some of the very advanced, complex work that's being done on campus, not just in the business school, but also in the engineering school or design, construction, and planning, that group. We work with engineering. We try to pull in the things that they're doing that might relate to the real estate industry and translate that to something that would lead to decisions that professionals are making in the market today. So it's very, very targeted at what's going on. And we hope to expand that and start providing greater data sources going forward. We're really in the very first stages of that part.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. Tell us about your research in particular. What are you interested in?
Well, I'm usually interested in the things that are complex and yield results that we don't expect. So I love it when, as my colleague Tim likes to say, sometimes we're the mythbusters, and we like to take things that everybody kind of takes for granted, and we look at the data and see if the data match what is being said. And so those things are interesting to me. But I would say in the center, our focus is whatever the industry is doing today. So we started looking at sea rise and a lot of environmental issues that are being addressed, from wetlands offsets to different laws that are regulating development. We've looked at insurance multiple times, which is a really big topic in the state. We've had multiple articles about the condo market recently, which is going through a lot of adjustments. Right now, we have a couple of students working on the hospitality market and the retail market. These are two sectors that I think are changing, and it may be that the state of Florida is slightly different than the nation, and we're in the middle of a couple of studies there. So we'll address any topic that has anything to do with real estate, or we think a lender or builder or broker or investor might be interested in or want to know how that might affect their business. That's our goal, is to try to find those topics and chase them down with some data.
Bill, you mentioned insurance. When I was at the Commercial Real Estate Women's Conference in Vancouver last year, I attended a session on insurance, and I have to say it was very sobering.
It's a fascinating topic to me. To me, this is one of those complex topics where I think the data might lead us to things that are different than what the sort of popular press or general perception is. And I became interested as I read article after article after article that basically said insurance is a problem because storms are more violent and more frequent due to climate change. And it crossed my mind that those are a lot of assumptions that we're making that are very sort of widely accepted overall. And so the first question we had is, are storms more frequent? Are there more frequent storms? It turns out storms come in different waves and bunches. And interestingly, one of the worst storms that ever hit Florida was in 1925. So really had very little to do with the current circumstances. This is very complicated because obviously we do have climate change going on. We do have some increased activity, but I think the biggest challenge for insurance in the state of Florida is the fact that we had no storms hit the state for a decade. We went from 2006 through 2016 with no storms hitting the state. And during that time, we had several changes in the regulatory system and the laws that associate with insurance. Now, starting in 2017, we've had a whole series of storms hit, and they've had major impact, obviously hitting very populated areas. And our system can't handle those the way they could previously. So we've discovered a lot of things through our analysis of that particular sector. We talked to Tim Serio, who is the director or president of the Florida Citizens Insurance Organization. And the comment that he mentioned in talking to a group of students was insurance underwriters can underwrite storms, they can't underwrite fraud and lawsuits. And that has had a big impact. So while I think we have to be mindful of the storms and the changing environment that we're facing there, we also are seeing the impact of what's happening in the legal structure going on with insurance. And I think both of those things are sort of coming together into a perfect storm. That being said, I think we are going to see some relief. Not that rates will come down, but I think they might stop blowing up quite like they were before, because we've had some changes in that environment. So there's been a lot going on in that sector. And again, we find it fascinating when we can try to put some data to the things that people just state offhandedly. Oftentimes we confirm those statements, but sometimes it's interesting to see the differences that arise.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So tell us more then about differences between what you see in the Florida real estate market and in the national real estate market. Obviously, insurance is a huge factor. What else is going on in Florida?
Yes, insurance is obviously a very big one. It affects everybody everywhere, but the California, which has been through a whole series of fires and issues in the past, they've suffered earthquakes. Florida, obviously dealing with a lot of storms. These are places that are very insurance intensive to begin with, and then you add on the challenges that come with them that it makes it more complicated. Something else where Florida is more intensely involved is in the condominium market. I think Florida has more condos than any other state in the nation. And obviously, we had the tragedy that occurred at the Surfside condo several years ago. Interestingly, when that happened, our first thought was, well, this could be devastating to the condo market. Maybe nobody will ever want to be in a condo again. And so 1 year after that happened, we looked at the market and we were shocked to find that, in fact, not only had the condo units continued to transact, but they transact and the values had gone up. We'd actually had increases in values. Now, something that's going on parallel to this is that we have a whole new focus on making sure that the condo market is more transparent and better understood by the buyers and sellers. It turns out that that's a challenge for those who are caught in the middle, but I think will lead to a much stronger, better condominium market going forward. And that's something that Florida will be impacted by, I think, more than any other state. We have a huge number of condos here relative to what's going on in other states, and something we should probably pay close attention to. It's a big part of our residential market.
Yeah.
So we've seen the inflation and interest rates change over the recent years. Again, a lot of coverage on those topics. Are there other influences that we have been overlooking?
I don't know if we've been overlooking them, but there are a lot of influences. The one thing that makes any investment market, real estate in particular, fascinating is that there are just so many components that can impact what's happening. I think, certainly taxes are something that can affect cash flows. Capital availability, in addition to the interest rates, we think of interest rates as sort of matching the capital together, but there are other factors that will influence capital availability, particularly sector by sector, that can have a remarkable impact on the cash flows of property and therefore its value and ultimately its use. And oftentimes we focus exclusively on rates and don't see so much about the capital availability. But it turns out that the markets tend to respond differently. So right now, there are interest rates available in the market, but there are a lot of lenders who just won't touch much office. And so the office sector, I think, is facing a fair amount of uncertainty, although I'm a firm believer it will come back. So you can put me on record now. The office sector is not gone. It will adapt. I don't know if that's next year or 5 years from now, but I do know it will adapt. I saw that in, you mentioned the term I've been in real estate. I've been here a long time. And when the financial crisis occurred, I honestly thought this is the end of the world as we know it, because there wasn't war fallout, but it was going to be the loss of credit. And if we lost credit, then our whole economic system was going to really collapse. And it turns out it took less than a year. We had almost fully recovered. It was an unbelievable rebound, in my opinion, to the dramatic impact that hit us at that time. And the real estate market took a few more years to recover, but it did come back, and we saw significant recovery. When we had terrorist attacks and planes flew into buildings into New York, my first response after that was nobody will ever go into a New York office building again. Nobody will ever go into a recognizable building or one that could be singled out. Nobody will ever touch that. And lo and behold, we now have Freedom Tower, and Freedom Tower has among the highest rents in the city. So it turns out real estate markets are unbelievably resilient and unbelievably adaptable. There's so many factors that can affect what's going on, and I think we'll see some recovery in all of those things. And it just takes time, and the market does adapt. So I think there are a lot of things affecting what's going on in the market. Politics in general, I think, are affecting a lot of things that are happening right now. Not one option or the other, but the fact that we're so extreme in our politics right now, I think, is causing a lot of people to react in ways that really have nothing to do with what a traditional market supply and demand factor might have. It has other impacts as well. So there are a lot of things that will affect cash flows. That's what makes this an exciting place to work.
One of the things that's occurred in the last several decades is the increased institutional ownership of real estate and the proliferation of individual asset classes. How is that affecting some of these market dynamics that you've been speaking about?
Yeah, there's always a difference when you go from small groups that are sort of very unorganized and making their own decisions based on supply and demand to having very organized organizations do that. And I'll say it's neither better nor worse. It's different. And so I think if I were to take your question, which I think is sort of broad reaching, but if I just focus on one item and look at single family housing and a lot of the focus that there's been on institutions buying single family housing, I have to admit I'm an old economist, so I'm not one of the new people who sort of focuses on a lot of the totally modern things. I kind of think you let markets work. And the more we let markets operate, the more efficient we'll become. And if it turns out that it makes sense for institutions to buy single family homes and lease those single family homes, then we should let that operate. I'm not terribly worried about people being moved out. The whole point of every market is that we try to find the allocation of resources that has the most value, and people will seek out the most. And if that's through individual property ownership, then the market will settle there. If that's through institutional ownership, then the market will settle there. So I don't feel the major suffering or concerns about institutions coming in and making those purchases. Quite frankly, it should make more things available, and it should be more professionally operated if we go that path. If we decide we don't like that path, then that won't be a successful model. And to be honest, I think that's still up in the air today. We're still seeing a lot of the changes that occurred when the housing market peaked and then collapsed after the financial crisis. We saw a lot of adjustments in the single family housing market. I think we're still in some of the aftermath of that and haven't really found equilibrium yet. So I think the institutional ownership of single family housing is yet to be really determined. I think it could go either direction from this point.
Yeah. So if that's one of the big changes in the market, and if we still don't know sort of the long-term equilibrium of institutional ownership of single family, from your perspective, if you were younger today, that's something certainly different from anything we've experienced when we were younger. What are the areas within real estate where you see change that a young person might be able to take advantage of or should explore?
Right. So one of the things that was important throughout my career was I did want to get back to a university at the end of my career, which clearly that's where I am. So I was happy to be able to make the transition from the professional world back to the academic world. And that gives me the opportunity to see a tremendous number of people in their 20s who are basically looking at all of the opportunities that are ahead of them and planning for growth. And quite frankly, it's an invigorating place to be, and I'm happy to have had that opportunity. And so with that point, I think that anything works. The real key is to get your hands dirty and get involved in what's going on. So virtually every year, we'll have a group of students. First of all, 80% of our master's students come in and say they want to go into development. That's a decision they might change after going through our program, but they mostly think they want to go in development, mostly because they equate development with construction, and those are two totally different things. And they also don't realize that typically development organizations are very, very small. The value of a development organization is that it coordinates a lot of other groups. And so there aren't as many opportunities in development, and generally you don't just start there, although it happens sometimes. The other thing is that we'll have people that will say, oh, I only want to go into industrial. And the reason they'll say that is because industrial is just absolutely rocking it. And everything's going well, and the rents are going through the roof, and we can't catch up with the demand. And they'll want to go into that sector. Or I want to go into multifamily because the multifamily, just the rents are skyrocketing and it looks great. A couple of years ago, they would basically say anything but retail. Retail is terrible. I don't want to touch retail. Again, being the old guy who's gone through, I'm thinking this is the right time to get into retail. You should focus on retail, because what will happen is this ball will continue to roll. And the thing that is red hot today, you're not going to be in a position to take advantage of for a few years. And so you want to be on top when your thing comes on the turn. And so I absolutely think there is no sector I would avoid. The definitions of real estate just continue to expand. I'm very active in the NACREIF organization, and it used to be we had 5 property types in NACREIF. There was multifamily, retail, industrial, office, and hotel. And then it turns out that as institutions change their portfolios, the hotel component of their portfolio got very, very small. And the things like self-storage and data centers and all these other areas became larger and larger. And now NACREIF has just made an adjustment to expand their definition and change the types that they're reporting. I think that is a great evolution, because we now have things that are becoming, as you mentioned, Karen, more institutionally recognized. Things that used to be mom and pop businesses are now somewhat institutional. We're seeing a whole expansion, and that creates a lot of development and new activity in those sectors, and I think can advance them. So if you ask me, where should a young person focus today? I think on anything. Pick something and go with it, and get in and get going, and also don't worry too much about what the first job is. Of course, anytime somebody's coming into the industry today, their first thought is, where can I make $1 million next year? And those of us who have slugged this out for a while are thinking, you really should be asking, where can I get the most exposure next year? I want to know, I want to be able to see transactions. I want to be able to observe what's happening with the market. I want to know what the pricing is doing. Those are the kinds of things that you'll use going forward. And there's no real estate sector that you can't learn that information in. So all sectors are good. Some are easier at the moment. There are many, many real estate careers that started as workouts. That's a prominent starting place, and a lot of people get a lot of great experience there.
Bill, you've had the advantage of spending time with some of the greats, throughout your Wall Street career, and now from your academic perch. What do you think are some of the most important skills, and are there some that would surprise today's students in terms of skills they may want to acquire and that are valued as one moves through a career?
Yeah, that's a very important question. One that we obviously, given that we're engaged with the education component, we're focused on that all the time. In fact, we debate this a lot. And I would say a very common view, I guess I'll put it as a common view, is that people think that they have to have software skills, right? They have to know Excel backwards and forwards. These days, we've sort of moved past Excel. It's now Python and AI programming, and I would say you absolutely have to have a base in that. But in my opinion, those are things you have to absorb or gain on your own. You have to have a skill that you can use to make yourself valuable to the decision makers. That's how you get to talk to the decision makers, is that you can run the Excel model, you can write the Python code, you can run the software program. And there's so many ways to gain that knowledge. You can get that online, you can get it through classwork, you can get it through just trial and error. In my mind, the most value and sort of the least available to us are the people who truly understand the relationships between supply and demand, time value of money, utility, what makes something better than something else. The sort of conceptual items, I think, are really, really important. They're very hard to translate to people. And if I can give you an anecdote that I recall, and I find this one to be so good because this occurred with a group of students that I think were spectacular. They were really, really good students and among the best that I see, and I know are going to have phenomenally great careers. But we had a presentation one time where they were talking through their project, and they had reported something that was financially impossible. They had given a mathematical result that was impossible. And it was because they had plugged numbers into a model, and the model spit out a result, and they just reported what the model said. And so being sort of the hardened guy from the from the dark side, I said, are you sure that that's what's happening? And to a T, every one of them shook their head and said yes. And I said, that can't be. You have to have an error in your model. And so in my mind, the thing that you can't easily get from AI, you can't easily get from an Excel model, and you can't easily get from somebody who is plugging things in and doing them in a rote manner, is you can't get the recognition when things make sense and when they don't make sense. And that's really hard to teach. It's very, very hard to examine, to determine whether somebody has that. But you will learn over time whether people have a feel for what makes sense and what doesn't. And in my mind, that is the thing that pushes people over to really dramatic success. And that is, a lot of people can plug numbers into a model. Very few people can look at it and say, I know there's something wrong with that, find out what it is. And in my mind, the people who grasp that is understanding the concepts. That's not a rote exercise. You can't just go practice it over and over. You have to see a lot of things. You have to talk with the people that are doing it, and you have to observe the market. And when you do that, you'll recognize these things that I think, in my opinion, is the greatest skill. And I've talked to many, many, many investors who are controlling billions of dollars who don't have a grasp of when it doesn't make sense. And in my mind, that's a shame. That's something that we should try to work for. And again, I don't have an easy answer for how we do it, but I think it's something we should always strive for, and that is have a grasp of what makes sense and what doesn't.
This was really a great interview, Bill. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and, going from capital markets to students in a classroom, I think is going to be really valuable for our listeners.
We've been speaking today with Bill Hughes of the Bergstrom Real Estate Center at the University of Florida. Bill is the executive director of applied research at the center, and he's been sharing some of his insights with us today. Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you both for the opportunity. I appreciate it.